And we're back. Welcome to another Owumu transmission. Today we have a hugely fascinating, in my humble opinion, of course, episode for you on how to socially engineer consent, predominantly through the use of propaganda and PR. But this is a very subversive aspect of our current day political world. This is rife. And not many people are truly aware of the level in which it's propagated and their potential role in it. So today we're going to be covering a bit of this. Now, David Icke, for any followers, has famously championed the term problem, reaction, solution, okay? He's been going on about this ad nauseum for 30 odd years now. But he couldn't be more on the money. Now, this is a technique or an established means of the state, a government, socially engineering the population in order to get what they want. So, we'll go through a few examples here. But the idea is you already have a solution that you want to implement. You then draw up a narrative, a story that's ready to go, ready to feed to the population before creating the crises in which to respond to, okay? So, we'll start with one very blatant, easy example, okay? So, invasion of privacy, we'll start down the bottom. The Patriots Act. This was a piece of legislation introduced after 9/11, okay? Now, hypothetically, this might have been a CIA false flag in of itself with the assistance of foreign states, who knows? Hypothetically. But why would they do this, okay? So you have to start from the back and work your way forwards. So the Privacy Act, or the Patriots Act, sorry, this was legislation designed essentially to allow the American government or its intelligence services to spy on all Americans, okay? Now, a lot of people would say, oh, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then what's the matter? Well, if you live in a free society, you don't need people delving into your private business. At least I personally think so. So, on top of this one aspect of the solution in which 9/11 hypothetically produced, literally, this is what the Edward Snowden leak was. It is that the NSA, and this was undisclosed, is spying on all American communications as a result of this piece of legislation pushed through. Okay, now what else could we potentially attribute as a solution to a hypothetical false flag, if that is what it was? Well, famously, two-time Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld came out on September 10th, the day before, announcing that the Pentagon was something like $2.7 trillion in deficit, which is ballooned astronomically since then. Don't quote me on that figure, but something ridiculous, okay? Now, of course, within Wall Street, there's a lot of folly and insider trading, all this, so, okay, there's perhaps some evidence here to destroy. So what happens? Building 7, which wasn't mentioned in the World Trade Center Commission report, or whatever, the 9/11 report a few years after, when you have the New York City chief fire inspector blatantly saying it was a controlled demolition, there is no separation from that and any standard controlled demolition, then you go, okay, well, what was in the building? Well, it was a securities exchange. You have a plane that flew into the Pentagon, hypothetically, and yet 2 stainless steel Rolls-Royce engines apparently completely incinerate into nothing, and yet you still find remains of passports. Now, this is the day after the Secretary of Defense mentioned there's trillions of dollars missing from the Pentagon budget. Okay. So, the Iraq War, the weapons of mass destruction that never were. The fact that they blamed it, the linchpin, Osama, was himself a CIA asset during the Gulf War. And we never found a body for him, maybe because he never died. But, this is all hypothetical, of course. So this is just one idea of, okay, what solution do we want? What do we want to implement into society? Okay, we create the narrative, Okay, now we create the crises to engineer that consent from the population. And I mean, I never looked into 9/11 because at that point in time, I mean, shit, I was 11 years old or something. You want to trust the people that serve you, you know. Your government, who are democratically elected to serve the constituents that they serve, you know, you want to be able to trust these people. It's too painful to think otherwise. And so you don't, because it's a more comfortable truth to accept. This is standard. This is very easy, you know. I constantly mention truth sucks until you live in it, you know. Often there are some very difficult truths, either about ourselves or the world that we live in, that we just plain reject because we don't want to believe them, you know. And if you don't want to believe them, you never will, all right? So this is some example of a solution which they had a reaction ready to go, the narrative, in order to engineer the crises which the people accept. Now, some other examples. Regime changes. Okay, so the leader of the free democratic world, the United States, they have meddled in just about every single election that they possibly could. You know, is that democratic process what they champion? So after Mussolini fell in Italy, World War II, during the new elections, there was a very close polling between the communists and the Democrats, or the Democratic Party, right? And I believe the communists were actually winning at this stage. And so the CIA, with assistance of the Vatican and the mob, the Sicilian Mafia, I mean, the CIA were partnered with Lucky Luciano, one of the most famous mobsters in American history. I mean, these weren't agents, these were partners. So if you're partnered with a crime syndicate, does that make you a crime syndicate? You tell me, right? So what they did, they couldn't bear the thought of socialist, communist governments coming into power, you know, and they used this threat narrative of the Soviet Union and so on and so forth. But these guys, I mean, take the French Connection, for example. They were literally hiring mobsters in Marseille, this is just after the inception of the CIA, to quite literally assassinate, disrupt any labor movement, the dock workers in Marseille, literally any potential uprising of the people, they did everything in their power to quell, okay? So, back to the Italian election, the communists are winning the election. So what did they do? Well, they hire the mob to literally set off car bombs. They start domestic terrorism, killing the Democratic Party, so that they could blame it on the communists. And sure enough, it won. They won. The Democrats, that is. It worked. Their plan worked. So what is the solution that they want? Well, they want their idea of democracy implanted in a foreign state. This doesn't seem very democratic, does it? So they kill people, their own supporters, no less, so that they can create their narrative that it was actually the communists doing it to them to get the solution that they wanted. This is how it works, okay? Not to mention that Italian example. Look at these regime changes. This is all directly after the inception of the CIA, by the way. Syria 49, Egypt 52, Iran 53, Guatemala 54, Congo 1960, Dominican Republic 61, South Vietnam, and we all know what a shit fight that was, 63, Brazil 64, up until we had one a few months ago in Venezuela. This is an entity that champions freedom, democracy, free speech, all these things, and yet they are the greatest censors of people that don't agree with their line of thinking in the world. So much so that they have to instill their own form of freedom on others. Now that is not democratic process, I'm sorry. Calls for war. On top of the regime changes, invasion of privacy, all these other measures, another note on the invasion of privacy. So, okay, the COVID problem, right? So the solution, what they wanted to implement, was a subdued population. God knows what else they were doing. But ultimately, they're looking to digitalize the idea. This is all invasion of privacy. This is tracking. So famously, I mentioned this in another video, Rishi Sunak, who was Prime Minister of Britain at the time, in 2019 purchased millions and millions of pounds of Moderna stock when they had 19 staff, no less. This is before COVID, before they had the vaccine and made all the money. And his wife, her father happens to be the second richest man in India, who owns a company called Infosys. Now, I've mentioned this before in an older video, but that is a company responsible for the digital rollout of IDs. You know, you see all these Palantir and Flock cameras going up everywhere in conjunction with these digital IDs, tracking all your spending, tracking where you are, all this stuff. This is quite literally an Orwellian dystopia. This is the Big Brother he was warning us about in 1948. You know, this is real, folks. Like, this is, I know it's an uncomfortable truth to accept, but this shit is happening. We are ruled by cartels, criminal organizations, under the guise of intelligence agencies. It's, you know, and it's funny, they spew the words like counterintelligence. No, they are not counter, they are offensive. They are the one doing the attacking, you know. It is not a response, it is an action, okay? Now, not to mention, you know, I mean, the drug, human and weapon trafficking, look at Iran-Contra scandal, look at the opium crisis. I mean, back in the 1940s, the CIA specifically, I know I'm focusing on America here, but this goes for all Western democratic states. They were the biggest buyers of opium in China, and this carried throughout the Vietnam War, obviously. But they were the biggest buyers of morphine, or opium, from China, which they smuggled through Turkey into Europe with the help of the Italian mob, which manufactured them, and from the Port of Marseille, also look into the French connection, just more examples of this, would then ship it across globally, okay? And, you know, so what do drugs serve them? Well, an addicted population is one easier to control. It also provides, you know, law, under my interpretation, a means of managing human capital. If you have an addicted population and you also have something that you can basically, jail, imprison, lower socioeconomic parties within your population, this is all just means of control. So they create this drug problem, and then they come in with the war on drugs, President Nixon. I mean, it's Reagan. It's absolutely ludicrous. This is what they're doing. And yet at the same time, they'll note that Timothy Leary, a very famous advocate for psychedelics, was the most dangerous man in America. And yet they're shipping all this fucking heroin. They developed crack cocaine. It's like, come on, man. This is literally, this is crazy shit. But this is what's going on. I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole artificial scarcity of energy, but these guys have access to free energy. If I can figure out Tesla's energetic principles, how to generate or how to draw power from ambient energy, they've been on this. They have Tesla's files. Human trafficking. I mean, look at what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. I mean, look at what's happening from South America into the American border. Where are these kids going? We won't go there because, you know, we don't want this one to get banned again. And weapons trafficking. I mean, these guys are supplying the mobs with their weaponry. Like, this is gnarly shit. And yet, they're clever enough to provide a narrative ready to go to the population that are so willing to just eat it up because they like to believe what they're told and won't question anything, that they are in fact their hero. And so we champion them. Oh, President this, Queen that, like... They're insidious. They are not your friend. Going down a layer. Okay, so they're the policy makers. Who are the system protectors? The immune system of this system. It's what you'd call the useful idiot. Now, this scales. I don't mean any offense here, obviously. But someone like a teacher at your local primary or high school, if they are parroting the same rhetoric that's just being fed to them without questioning, okay, is this real or is this false? Is this true history? Is this false history? Is this true science? Is this false science? That is playing the role of the useful idiot. Now, all throughout governments, you know, this isn't to say they are well-intended people. A lot of them are, maybe, But you have to understand that is the power of it. When you have generational programming, generational brainwashing, MK Ultra, bruh, when you have this generations upon generations repeating the same thing, you end up at a place in this cycle where the programmees, the ones that have been brainwashed, are now doing the programming through good intent because they don't know any better. Now, that is the most dangerous, the most subversive of the lot, and that is the role of the useful idiot, okay? Now, for those working in PR, communications, and marketing, this is perhaps the most insidious, and I mean no disrespect here, obviously, but what is PR and comms? It's making a situation look better than it is, more often than not. It is selling the population on a mistruth. Okay, now, is that the same role as the useful idiot? Of course it is. It is no different. This is, by sugarcoating horseshit to a population and turning it into whatever they want to lap it up, this is no different or no better, than what these higher ups are doing. And people, if you're selling Coca-Cola, yeah, I mean, it's bad, we should be drinking less and consuming less sugar, but it all has an effect. And when it's all put together, you have one seriously destructive mechanism, okay? This is hugely subversive, massively subtle. Take your local newsreader, growing up with a familiar voice, a familiar face on the television, you hear these people, and because you know them, because they are familiar, you trust them. It is the news. Oh, if it's coming from the news, it must be true. And I mean, there is a reason legacy media is now completely dwindling, because people are waking up to this. They know they've been fed bullshit for generations. Okay, so food for thought. The divide and conquer. Now, and this is a primary role of this local newsreader, okay? The divide and conquer. How do you better manage these communications, this PR, this propaganda? It's no different, right? Well, you polarize the society. You divide them. So you have one channel, you can feed them this. You have another channel, you feed them this. And that internal tension between them, not realizing that left and right, politically, are feeding the same agenda, you then create this vitriol, a lower vibrational state of the population in which through these distractions, these petty semantics, lose sight of what is, This goes on to the next slide. So this is the nous. This is the intellect. This is the ability to discern truth. What is real? What is not real? What's bullshit? What is, worth taking into account? Now, this has only been exacerbated by the exponential rise in technology of late. AI, in specific. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't have some great use cases. I've covered this in a video prior. But when you get this to outsource your thinking, say, for example, and not just AI, say you watch a YouTube video, but the first thing you do is go to the top-rated comment. You go to a Reddit thread, you're looking at the top-rated comment, a news article, and you're looking at the comments. You're adopting the general consensus. Now, the general consensus, unfortunately, looking back in more recent history, hasn't always been right. In fact, more often than not, it's probably been wrong. The idea of conspiracy theorists, that was a term coined by the CIA themselves, who were the first to, ridicule these conspiracy theorists. Well, you look back in retrospect now and you go, okay, well, what is conspiracy? Most of it's actually really delayed truth. It's just a narrative that requires some eyes to see through it. I'm not saying I know I can be a bit of a conspiracy theorist, because I believe in a lot of it. I don't believe in all of it, though. This requires nous. Now, when you are one of these people that requires others' opinions to validate yourself, if you don't trust your own opinion on things, you can't trust your intuition, your gut feeling, your instinct, your instinctual knowing. If you don't learn to trust this because you are outsourcing your thinking, then you will never develop it. Like anything, nous, discernment, takes practice. So instead of just looking at the top comment, maybe read the article. Instead of having a look at however many likes it got, maybe watch the video. You know, these are simple things, but because we're lazy and it's an unfortunate truth that many of us like being told what to do. I mean, anyone out there who is task orientated, you'll find that when they run out of things to do, that is, them being told of things to do, hey, can you do this? Oh, you got that to do? Oh, yeah, you've got this social meeting. As soon as you run out of them, they don't know what to do because they're not proactive. They're reactive in their management of themselves, in their day-to-day. Now, one last thing I'll add here is becoming the master at nothing. I go on about this quite often. Just because people get gaslit into the idea that you need to be doing something, that there's always something to do. But and there is when there's nothing to do, and it is do nothing. Just observe, okay? I've got another video I'll do probably tomorrow, which will be more practical in its advice, sharing some tips and ideas onto how better do nothing. But until then, woo-moo, woo-way.